So my wife went off visiting her relatives not long ago, and one of the things that she came back with was that they had just acquired some wooden cooling racks. And she said, you ought to put up a video showing people how to make these because they make great gifts and they're dead easy to make. And she's had one that I made dating from perhaps as much as 40 or 45 years ago. She's always been a baker. She's provided me with a couple of loaves of bread every week or two. And I'm very grateful for that because it's so much better than store-bought bread that it's just a treat to have. She makes occasional pies and cookies, and these things get cooled on this wooden rack, and here's a picture of it. And I think you can probably tell there's not a great deal of work that goes into it. You can make it out of scraps, basically, and I have some scrap oak on my hands from the dining table project. And it's too small a piece of wood to be much use for anything except something like this. And I'm going to use dowels, just purchased off from Lowe's rather than trying to make dowels. So that is an extra expense added in. But I decided to doll it up a little bit, and since I've got oak for the sides, that I buy oak dowels as well. Which are a little more expensive than poplar dowels, but I think they look a little nicer. So let's go through this build. It's a real quick one, and the hardest part about it is trying to get all these little dowels into holes. So I rough sketched this out just to give me a pattern to follow. I know that I want this one to be smaller than what I made previously. If you saw those two loaves of bread, had plenty of room on that rack, and it's a little large to be getting in and out of the cupboard just for those. So I'm going to break this down so that it's basically the size for one standard pie to be sitting on. And that, as I understand it, is something like between 9 and 10 inches across. So that's how I'm going to build this. These dowels here are spaced 1 inch apart, which is pretty close if it's going to be used for just putting things like pie plates on. But since my wife does like to put cookies on for cooling, she wants the same size spacing in between as the previous one that she's been using for so many years. So I always round my edges off for something like this, but I was just looking on the internet, and on eBay they just have square corners on these things, and people are selling these small wooden cooling racks for high 20s into mid $30 range. So you can save yourself some bucks and put this together in a day on the weekend and enjoy them almost right away. So that means what this particular dowel is the real stiffener. That's a larger one, and these are all glued into place. And what I found out on the first one is that there has to be a mechanical fastener, because after many years, actually, some of the glue started letting go. So I'm just going to pop in, once this is glued into place, I'm just going to put a single small brad in through there, just to make sure that it doesn't pull out and there's no sideways challenge to the glue. And that's what it looks like from the side, and this is what it looks like from the front. So you get an idea that there's a difference in size between the dowels. These smaller dowels are 5/16 inches, and this one is a 1/2 inch dowel. So they don't get to be real expensive, but you know, this is a pretty inexpensive project. Not much going on with this project. This is it. This is all the parts. The sides are going to come out of this, which is already a piece of dimensioned oak. It's already been planed down to 3/4 inches and just sitting over. I had to get 4 dowel rods. I need 10 pieces that are 11 inches And unfortunately that means that I'm only going to take a little bit out of the fourth one. But I suspect I'm going to be making several of these, so that's another little step that I'm going to show you. And this is the 1/2 inch piece, which is going to be the structural piece. And what I'm doing here is just putting up a cardboard template for the side, which means, well, I'm doing that simply because if I'm going to make more than one, I might as well make them all consistent with one another and make my layout very easy. So a template provides that for me. This is just cutting the dowels to length. Using a stop block on the sled ensures that they'll all be the same dimension. So rather than keep a real sharp edge on there, I'm going to run it through my smallest roundover bit. I don't want to get into those holes, but I think I've got it set so that it's just going to be shy of those, and that'll be a lot easier to handle. Well, I'm getting down to an important stage, which is gluing all of these things in place and assembling the project. And one of the things that I hadn't considered completely is the idea that commercial dowels are notoriously undersized. So my set of drills are perfectly sized, but if you see what's going to happen here, that slips in there and it's got wiggle room. That's the 5/16. And the same thing happens with the 1/2 inch. So I can't use regular old PVA glue on that because it has no gap filling capabilities whatsoever. And that means that my choice is epoxy. And with all of those things to fill up, I need to go to my slow epoxy, which is a wet system, and it takes quite a while actually for that to cure, and in this case it's going to be good. I did do an experiment here using 5-minute epoxy, and for the 1/2 inch I put that in place, and then I ran a 1-inch brad in through the end, and I'm telling you what, that's going nowhere. So sleeping on it was a good idea. I was going to try and do this in way too complicated a form, so I'm going to break it down into smaller pieces. And what I'm going to do to begin with is put the two structural braces. I'm going to glue those into place first, just those two, and then I'm going to use this to hold it in its proper alignment, and I built this assembly jig so that it remains square. And that won't take but a couple hours to become nice and tight, and then I can start putting in the smaller pieces, which in fact I talked myself out of needing to glue those into all of those so they can be loose, because the structural pieces will hold it together just fine. I don't want to put a whole lot of stress on this quite yet. It's only been an hour and a half, I think, something like that. So the epoxy is set up pretty well, but it doesn't cure that fast. But as I said, what I'm going to do is put a brad right through there so that it goes into the stub tenon of these structural dowels. And this is my weapon of choice, which is it's going to throw an 18 gauge 1-inch brad in there, and I'm going to use this simply because I have it. Pretty sure that a lot of folks don't have one of these, and under that circumstance what I would do would be to drill a very small hole, pilot hole in there, and then tap a small brad finish nail, and that would do exactly the same thing. Take a little more time, but this is what I've got, so it makes a good thing to use.
This really doesn't need to be stained, but I have a lot of leftover experimental stain from my table project, so I thought I would use some of it here.
Okay, I think that's plenty long enough for me. Let's get rid of this miserable looking soaked up paper.
I'm sorry I didn't recognize at the time that my battery was going bad on my microphone.
And just clean everything off.
So what I'm explaining here is that you need to really clean all of the liquid that has not penetrated the wood and get it off from there. And you do have to worry about getting some of the stain onto your gloves and then transferring it back over to some area where you've already tried to dry off. It leaves smudges, so it's better if you use part of that towel in each hand so that you don't contaminate the surface again.
Right, a nice big fluffy cloth like this can help you get into those spots. Okay, last thing to do on this project is to put a light coat of beeswax.
So here I'm applying my food grade finish, which is a beeswax and mineral oil mixture. There are plenty of internet sites that you can go to get the recipe for this, but typically speaking, what you find is it's going to be 2 ounces of beeswax melted into 1 cup of the mineral oil, and that's basically the same stuff that you would find on Lowe's shelf for $8 or $9, and a quart of mineral oil in the drugstore will probably only cost you $1, $1.50. So this is a pretty inexpensive thing to be doing. When I apply this to my cutting boards, I will ordinarily put a heat gun on it to help it penetrate the wood, but I'm not going to do that in this case. I'll just let it dry the way it is. And then just a final buff to take any excess off and really just finish the piece up.
So there you have it. It's a fairly straightforward, simple project, very useful in the kitchen for cooks and bakers. And you can make those pretty quickly, you know, just a few hours on the weekend, give you something to do, and give them away. Folks love them. You can use it as a trivet if you're a cook the way I am and you need to put a hot pan down on a counter, or you can use it as a cooling rack for the bakers who need to cool their breads and cookies and things like that. And I also would point out that if you don't have a shop full of tools the way I do, you can certainly make one of these fairly quickly with a very small number of tools. For instance, you can go purchase yourself an 8-foot long board, 1x3, and it's nominally 3/4 of an inch thick and 2.5 inches wide, which is exactly what that is. And if you have a saw of some sort, you can just cut it down. You can leave the ends square, that's no problem. And if you've got an electric drill, that makes life pretty easy, but If you've got one of those hanging around, you could certainly drill your holes just with a brace and bit. Give it a try. It's a lot of fun. Thanks a lot for watching this video, and come on back. I'll have something again pretty soon. I'm Tom Stevens.